It's probably going to ask you permission to record.
Okay.
Did it do so?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, well, I'm going to get us started so that we can do this a quick share of some of the slides from the parent presentation the other night on social emotional learning and you. This will be a slightly condensed version of the 1 hour one that was live and in person, but just an opportunity for those who weren't able to make it to take a look at the slides. So I am very excited to meet you through this forum. And also joining me right now on this is a wonderful social worker at your school. I don't know if you want to say hi, Veronica.
Hi, everyone.
All right, so we will begin. So begin with who I am. I'm an associate professor of educational leadership at North Central College in Naperville. I'm also a former Catholic school principal. I was at Longwood Academy, St. Margaret of Scotland, and Maria High School on the south side of the city before I moved on to teaching at the college level. I also wanted to just mention that I'm also a teacher who knows that too many times students don't always see themselves in their own learning, or they're frustrated because we as educators know that they know so much more than a number on a page, and they have so many wonderful gifts. And social emotional learning very often are those assets that are brought to the table that are not always measured on report cards. I know that I am also a mom who knows my child has a lot more gifts than can necessarily be recognized within the structures of the school community. And I'm also a lifelong learner who's still learning, and I'm sharing with you just some of where I'm at on this journey in terms of better understanding social emotional learning and the role that it can play in a thriving life for our children. So I was looking to gauge how many people in the audience had some knowledge of SEL or social emotional learning. And it seemed like from the responses that most people felt like they had very limited knowledge of SEL. So we moved right into our goals for today. And that is to know what SEL or social emotional learning means, what its role in education has been, and also some challenges that students might face with SEL growth and how we can support their development in social emotional learning skills in the home. So this is just a quick activity as an example of how we can kind of gauge how students are doing in the classroom or even at home without there having to be a really big sense of vulnerability. So it's just to ask kind of for a weather report for how somebody's feeling. So if things are really great in someone's life and there's just no issues that are really on someone's mind, they might be a number 1 for sunshine, and students who are sharing might tell why they feel that way. Maybe it's partly cloudy where it's mostly good, but there's some clouds to deal with. Maybe it's very cloudy and you kind of are waking up and wondering, is it going to storm today or is the sun going to break out? And there's a lot of unknowns there, whether or not to have some trepidation or hope, depending on how the day will go. And then there are times we're just having to deal with storms in our lives. And in fact, sometimes those storms can be so severe that it feels like we need to take cover, maybe being sent to the basement with our tornado siren going off. So this is just a quick way that we could gauge how the audience for this presentation is feeling just by doing a 1 through 5. But for students, it's just an example of how we can help them get in touch with where they're feeling in terms of their own social emotional well-being without there having to be a lot of risk. They can decide how much to divulge, whether they just want to say what the weather is or whether they want to explain what those storm clouds are or how they're coping with whatever those challenges are. Another thing about this type of an activity at the beginning of a class, it allows that teacher to check in with how they're doing. It allows the student to reflect on how they're feeling. But it allows some of that vulnerability that's really up to the student as to how much they want to share. But it can be a very benign practice. And in this case, just having them do numbers, they don't do a lot of sharing, but it still is a quick check-in. So with that said, we jumped into what is SEL, and here are a bunch of different words that we see and encounter all the time in education and in our lives. And really, these are all SEL words. They all fit under that umbrella. So SEL has been around for a long time. I mean, parents are involved with the social and emotional development of their children when they're teaching them to be honest, when they're telling them not to quit, when they're teaching them to be grateful for things in their lives or to show self-control, and when they are trying to help them show character or acceptance of others. These are all attributes that have for all of time, have really been aspects of parenting and aspects of what schools are trying to do. And SEL has just been a way of kind of formalizing that. So here's a definition that's widely agreed upon at this point. It's usually the basis for a lot of state standards, and that is from the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, or CASEL, which is headquartered actually here in the University of Illinois, Chicago. And it says that SEL is a process. So it's not like a specific thing as much as it's acknowledging a growth journey. None of us are done with our social and emotional development. We're always developing. And some things, maybe I was really good at gratitude, and maybe now I'm having to relearn how to be grateful. These are different stages that we may go through in life because it's part of a process. But specifically, what is that process helping us to develop skills and knowledge and attitudes towards? Well, one is our own sense of self or identity. One's identifying and managing our own emotions, and also both our personal and the goals of groups that we're a part of. One's showing empathy for others. One is our relationships, how we manage our relationships, and finally is responsible decision making and caring decision making. And so even as I describe those, you can see how there's elements of character education that are embedded with that. Sometimes people think of character ed as the umbrella with SEL under it. Other times we talk about SEL as the umbrella with character under it. But any way you look at it, those things are infused with one another, because certainly we're not trying to help people persevere in finding new ways to rob a bank. We're saying persevere in ways that have a benefit to themselves and to others. And on the right side, you can see the 5 essentials that really are reflected in SEL in a very concise way, and that's self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills. And it's those 5, those big 5, they're often called, that we see the most as we are encountering SEL. So a bit of background on SEL, it actually is often traced to Dr. James Comer from the Yale Child Study Centers, who developed a school that was really focused on that development of skills that students need to manage emotions and social as part of, really the focus of the school rather than strictly grades or academics. And that term SEL came out in the 80s and 90s from Maurice Elias, who is still doing work out at Rutgers, and Weisberg, who actually just recently passed away, but he was the executive director of CASEL at the University of Illinois, Chicago. They came up with that term, social emotional learning. And in the 90s is also when the Collaborative for Academic, Social, Emotional Learning, CASEL, was formed. Tim Shriver and also Daniel Goleman were part of the group that started that. Daniel Goleman, you might know because he gained a lot of fame in business circles with his book, Emotional Intelligence, really talking about how important it is that we have emotional intelligence, or EQ, not just IQ, and how we're managing things. And he just came out with a new book just a short time ago. He's still an author that is very strong in the field. Also in the 90s, there was a lot of work being done in the neurosciences about the whole emotional or affective aspects. And we also saw in psychology, positive psychology, about happiness and emotions and their impact. Like one of the Stephen Acor, one of his works talks about whether or not happiness is how people succeed versus the product of success is happiness, and really re-examining that. But so that's just a little bit of that history. By the 1997, it started to become clear that social emotional really could have a strong role in the schools. And in 97, many of the Castle founders came out with guidelines for SEL for schools. And then here in Illinois in 2003, the Illinois Children's Mental Health Act was looking at early childhood and with real concerns about the development of children. And it made some strong recommendations. And it was out of that the Illinois adopted social emotional learning standards for PK through 12 back in 2004. And we were really at the forefront in Illinois of recognizing the importance of SEL and making those standards a part of a child's education in Illinois. We also, by 2015, federal funds could be used related to SEL, showing at the national level the recognition of its importance. And we also constantly see that employers are asking for stronger SEL skills, often called soft skills in the workplace. They want to see that someone's not just having the grades or coming out with certain degrees, but that they know how to work with one another, then be collaborative and be responsible and be empathetic. Those qualities of SEL are very essential for workplace success. But and this is just some of that background, that 92% of employers say SEL skills such as problem solving and communication is as much, if not more important than technical skills. And we see the research that shows how much SEL helps our students to take their dreams and help them make it into plans, to have more college and career success, lead happier and healthier lives, and have stronger relationships with others and with the community. And so this is kind of the framework for CASEL, and there's a short video that you can watch when this PowerPoint's posted, but it is, CASEL is the basis for the Illinois state standards. And you can see here in the middle of this wheel, those 5 dimensions we just talked about, but it's also within the context of not just classrooms and schools, but also families are teaching SEL and communities are through their partnerships and how we align learning with our community values. Now, transformative SEL is a term that's often used to kind of show the relationship between SEL and centering a student's lived experiences so that students don't feel like they are outliers in their learning experience, but they see themselves reflected in terms of the cultural responsiveness of the school environment. And when we start talking about SEL's role in our schools, we should see that on a national level, SEL has also been embraced, that there's 29 states that have SEL guidelines. These are just some of the links to them. And that even though Illinois adopted it in 2004, that it was really 10 years later that you started seeing all these other states adopting them. And on top of there being 29 states with SEL guidelines, 14 of them have them as competencies or standards, similar to Illinois. It should be noted all 50 states have something about SEL for pre-K, recognizing how that is really foundational to other learning. And we also really, really important to recognize that SELs really got popular in terms of being embraced by mainstream education, even though it was always present in some form, but that we recognize doing a better job with SEL actually boosts academic achievement. There's been hundreds of studies, a meta-analysis of both immediate results and long-term results that show SEL programs actually have a positive impact on academic performance and help students with focus and persistence and productivity and engagement. All of those are aspects that are positively impacted by SEL. So then we just take a look at what the SEL standards are. They came out of the Illinois State Board of Ed, the Illinois Children's Mental Health Partnership, and CASEL all work together to create SEL. And the idea behind SEL, and this is straight from the Illinois State website, was that it would be embedded into our existing curriculum and take advantage of teachable moments and promote students' feelings of autonomy and competence, and help that provide them with opportunities to practice their SEL development. And this is an example of what the SEL standard looks like. There's only 3 standards, but there are several indicators for a total of 10 different indicators. So this first standard is about self-awareness and self-management, 2 of the big 5 we talked about. And here's just one quick example of how that looks across grade levels. One indicator of self-awareness and self-management would be just identifying one's emotions and behaviors. And so for me, like maybe I have to pause and think, wait, what's going on? I guess I'm really angry right now. That's why I'm acting the way I am, is because I'm actually angry. And what am I angry about? And I can do that analysis as an adult and figure that out. But students, of course, that isn't always that easy. So younger grades might just be identifying what emotion they're feeling and doing so accurately. But by the time they're in high school, we're expecting that students will not only be able to evaluate the emotion, but how they express that emotion in different situations and how that affects others. And so you can see this layering of somebody's development from just recognizing your emotion to seeing its impact in its expression and becoming more self-aware in that regard and more responsible as well. So this is just one quick example of what those SEL standards look like. It's the same standard and indicators, but then it's expressed in different ways across the grade levels. And these are them. These are the indicators, the total of 10 different indicators under these 3 standards. Again, the self-awareness and self-management being the one we just looked at. Then it moves into social awareness and interpersonal skills, and then decision-making skills and responsible behaviors. And so all of these are things that, of course, schools have been doing for forever. We have wanted students to contribute to the school and to our community and to make good decisions and to recognize similarities and differences and resolve conflicts. These are things that we've always wanted, but SEL does so in a much more deliberate way and really recognizes that doing so helps a child to really develop academically and also in terms of their long-term success. So Castle here at this school is actually one of the, SEL at this school is one that has actually been given a seal of approval, so to speak, from Castle, because it's seen as being in alignment with the framework and having high quality factors so an examination of your caring school community curriculum is something that's been seen as very positive. So there are these lessons that are being taught 30 minutes a day, but it's also how the caring school community, it's how it approaches relationships and community building and how it addresses discipline practices, all with this idea of not just saying, oh, this is the consequence for your behavior, but saying, hey, let's stop and figure out why did you act that way? And can you identify the feelings that you had? And really processing what the causes might be, not just what the consequences will be because of the behavior. And in this way, helping students to truly develop their SEL competencies. Now, sometimes SEL is controversial. On one side, some critics say that it's racist, that it's centered too much on a mainstream culture that's not as inclusive. And others say, oh, SEL has a liberal agenda and it's trying to brainwash children. I would contend that that kind of a debate centers itself in kind of people's impressions of SEL. And you can really see what SEL here is in your school and how it's being taught. And there's nothing that's liberal or racist about how SEL is being done here. It's really about helping students to develop themselves and their well-being and their ability to show their sense of self and others and all of the self-regulation and social awareness skills that will help them be successful. So what is SEL not? It's not something that pulls students away from academics. It's not therapy. It's not a political agenda. It's not one size fits all. What it really is trying to boost academic performance through SEL development, build relationships and well-being, help students to see different perspectives and share ideas with one another collaboratively, and also is something that is very embedded in your school community and your extended community because it centers the student. So there's a couple resources here where SEL is really has a strong research base out of Yale and Harvard and Rutgers. Rutgers, it's the Social Emotional Character Development Lab. Yale's got an emotional intelligence, Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and Harvard calls theirs EASL, the ecological approaches to social emotional learning. But all of them have a very robust research showing the importance of SEL development, and it is a nice basis, and you can visit any of those centers' websites to learn more. So in terms of SEL, we definitely see that if students aren't given enough support to develop positive SEL, that they will have more likely to struggle academically, to have issues in terms of dropping out, or to have a lack of perseverance. And that in fact, the relationship between SEL and personal satisfaction, growth, and citizenship have been really shown within research. So SEL really has a positive impact on underperformance in students and can really help boost motivation and engagement, as students really have a stronger sense of self and of their ability to influence their world. It's a very necessary and essential part of helping students who are at risk of dropping out or not succeeding. And things like disaffection, alienation, and dropout issues will correlate, and discipline issues are correlated with poor SEL skills. So we want as much as possible to try to impact this in a positive way. It should be noticed, however, that if teachers perceive students to have an poor SEL skills, it also can be a self-fulfilling process. So we want to make sure that students really feel like they're seen and centered in their education and not marginalized outside of it, because if they're excluded and seen as having poor SEL, that can be a real problem as well. We want students to feel they're at the center of this SEL development that is seen in the curriculum, in school, and society. So we talked a little bit about the criticisms, and one of the things I talk about with SEL is that how important it is that it be done well, because if SEL development isn't done well, it can actually do some damage. When it's done well, this is a wonderful way to help support our students' mental well-being. Research shows that social emotional learning helps young people cope with stress and helps reduce their symptoms of depression and anxiety. It gives them tools for managing the stressors of life. And to support the well-being of children, we really have to support their SEL. And there's been such a rise of student mental health concerns, cyberbullying, and things like our school safety issues with the unfortunate recent shootings in schools. We can really see how much students can be impacted by some of these stressors. And SEL is one of the tools we have to help support them so that they can feel stronger in handling these. So I use this as just a quick look of when SEL is being done well, it's like having that sundae on the right. If it's done poorly, it's like curdled ice cream. That's really could do some damage. So an example of that would be if a student made mistakes and we said, the way you looked at your mistake and figured out how to correct them was amazing perseverance. I see how much you're growing. It's very specific. It's talking about the skills they were using, not about the final product. That can be a real positive way to develop a student's SEL. If we just make a blanket statement like, nice job sticking with it, it doesn't really help them recognize the skill they utilized in order to persevere. And so it's a little bit more like ice cream that's still tasty, but a little melted. But where SEL can really be damaging is if we do it in a way that reinforces negativity. So if we say to a student, you need to show more self-regulation, that's why you're making mistakes, we're using SEL as a tool of oppression rather than helping to support that student's development. And that can be very damaging. And that's really where some of the criticisms of SEL come, is when we see SEL just being used as another way to have a deficit framing of students, rather than seeing it as a tool to help empower them in their development. So then we get to the meat and potatoes for what we can do at home. And here's some of what research shows mean, just simply being a really good listener to your student and modeling behavior like good listening can be a wonderful way of helping to develop your students' social emotional learning skills. Any ways you can nurture their self-esteem and help them to respect differences so they can see they don't always have to agree with others, but they can still show respect to those people. And that we take advantage of support services like the social worker in your school, so that we really feel like it takes a village to help raise our children. Some at-home strategies that we just mentioned, these give more specific ways that we could do that. Honoring your child's accomplishments, giving them responsibilities in the home. All of these can be ways of helping to do some of those practices. The Center for Disease Control talks about helping children to sometimes follow their lead, show them warmth and sensitivity, give routines in the house and household rules, sharing books and talking with children, supporting their health and the safety, and then using discipline, but without harshness. And I really want to emphasize the routines. I myself am a foster parent, and I am amazed at how much just a simple routine, whether it's saying prayers at night or whether at dinner, just asking what was the best part or the most challenging part of your day, that those routines can be a great opportunity for students to talk about their feelings and what's been happening and really help them with their processing of social situations and their own feelings or emotions regarding situations. That set routine where they have a space that's safe to do that sharing and help foster that metacognition or thinking about their own thinking can be very powerful. So additional SEL tips that I kind of compiled from a few sources is taking some time for your own care, your own self-care, and that modeling that for students, whether it's journaling or going for walks, praying, meditating. The active listening, labeling feelings and knowing that feelings aren't bad. You can feel angry. It's not bad. What do you do with that feeling? Do you draw about it? Do you express it in words? Do you journal? Or do you strike out at others? I'm helping students see that the emotion's not the issue. It's how they choose to channel it. Mindfulness practices like breathing practices can be very powerful. Being present and together. I think that driving your children can be a really powerful time together that we sometimes miss because we're just trying to get someplace. But that can be a great time for talks or for listening to what the child has to say, or even listening in on their conversation with others to better understand how they're processing things around them. Routines and traditions, we spoke about the importance of routines. That can be very comforting to students, especially those who have experienced trauma. Celebrations so that we can really savor the good things and help foster a sense of gratitude for what we have. Encouraging students' interest and participating in them even when they aren't our interest. They love fishing or they love drawing, making sure we're encouraging that even if it's not our own interest or our own gifts. And having some of that shared creativity and vulnerability can be a big part of it, as well as using external resources as appropriate. And so we did have a little giveaway as part of the class, as part of the session. If that's a book you might want to borrow and use, you might be able to contact the school. But many times you'll find a book that's focused on social emotional doesn't work just on one quality. It'll end up helping encourage several different qualities. So hopefully we covered the 4 different areas that we hope to do in this presentation. If you want more information, you can use that scan to scan a website that has a copy of this PowerPoint and also ways to contact me, but they're also up there on the screen. So with that, I think I'll stop sharing and thank you again for taking this time to invest in a little bit of information regarding SEL in general and its role at your school. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.